Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. We're only a couple weeks away from UFC 275, Glover Teixeira versus Jiří Procházka. So I wanted to make a video going through the card, discussing all the notable fights on the card, and then at the end of the video, I am going to grade UFC 275. I've done videos like this in the past, so I figured why not do it for UFC 275 as well. Before I even get into that, if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. And also, before I get into any of the fights, go look up UFC 275 right now on Tapology and then comment down below and give me your grade for UFC 275. I'm curious to know what your grade is before you even hear what I'm grading UFC 275. Okay, let's get into the fights. The main event is Glover Teixeira defending his light heavyweight title against Jiří Procházka. This is a very compelling matchup stylistically, but also there's some great storylines here because old man Glover at 42 years old captures the belt off of Jan Blachowicz, and now he's fighting a young savage like Jiří Procházka. And this is one of those fights where not only is it stylistically interesting, it's another one of those fights where, okay, if Glover loses, where does he go from here? He's getting up there in age. He might retire if he ends up losing this fight, especially if he loses in dominant fashion. And then you have Jiří Procházka, who's some of the new blood within the UFC light heavyweight division. He's only 2 fights in and he's getting a title shot, but he's had 2 dominant performances, 2 impressive finishes within the UFC. And now he gets a chance to see if the young can eat the old like we perpetually see in this sport. And stylistically, I mean, this is a fight that people have asked me about multiple times. Who are you picking, Glover or Jiří? And it's a fight that I'm 50-50 on because Glover Teixeira, if he gets you down, he has some of the most brutal top game, whether it be his offensive jiu-jitsu or his control and his ground and pound. If he can control you on the ground, Glover Teixeira is not a guy that'll just lay on top of you. He drops nasty ground and pound and brutalizes guys. Look what he did to Anthony Smith. And if he gets Jiří Procházka down, there is a chance, even at 29 years old, that Glover Teixeira could give Jiří Procházka a career-altering beating. And then you have Jiří Procházka, who fights like an absolute madman. I mean, look what he did to Dominic Reyes, that spinning back elbow that put him out cold. Incredible performance against the elite of the division. And before that, he beat Volkan Ozdemir. That was a brutal KO as well. And Jiří Procházka may not only be one of the most exciting fighters in the light heavyweight division, Jiří Procházka may be the most exciting fighter in all the UFC. The way he fights, he moves in with his hands down, and he's just constantly throwing kill shots. And I'm wondering, I know Glover's plan is going to be to come out and grapple. He's not going to want to stand there and trade with Jiří Procházka. He's going to want to take him down, brutalize him on the ground, look for a submission, look for a TKO ground and pound finish. But I'm wondering if Jiří Procházka's style, because his hands are always just naturally so low, if one, can he get clipped by Glover Teixeira on the way in? Look what Glover Teixeira did to Ryan Bader years ago. But also, will that low stance help Jiří Procházka be able to defend some of these takedowns? And the pressure that Jiří Procházka likes to put on some of these guys is incredible. And I could also see Jiří Procházka with another highlight reel KO. Glover Teixeira is perpetually getting caught in a lot of these fights. Even in the Jan Blachowicz fight where he won his title in his last fight at UFC 267, he was clipped a couple times by Jan Blachowicz. The fight before that, Thiago Santos almost finished him, I think twice. Glover Teixeira is perpetually getting clipped and rocked in fights. And I wonder, is now going to be the time where his lights get shut off? It's only the laws of averages. Eventually, it's bound to happen. So stylistically, I am super excited to see what can happen in this fight because, it's really one of those fights where I could truly see it going either way. And then you have, the fact that it's for the light heavyweight title. You have the future division at stake because Glover Teixeira may retire even with a win. If he beats Jiří Procházka, he may walk away. I know he's kind of said, oh, I'm not retiring. And maybe he won't because if he is able to defeat Jiří Procházka, he's probably going to be defending against Jan Blachowicz, who he already has a win over. So it's going to be a little bit of a weird situation where we have 40-year-olds fighting over the light heavyweight belt again. But I'm very interested in this fight. I cannot wait for Glover Teixeira versus Jiří Procházka. It was actually supposed to happen at UFC 274, but then got shifted to UFC 275. I'm super excited for this fight, and I can't wait to see how this fight plays out. The co-main event is Valentina Shevchenko versus Taila Santos. This is a fight where I'm kind of torn because I am always excited to see Valentina Shevchenko fight because she is an elite level world-class fighter. But at the same time, the division just lacks any real competition. And Taila Santos, while she looked good in her last fight, she beat Joanne Wood. How good of a win is that really? And I know Joanne Wood's been close to a title shot before, but when I look at Joanne Wood fight or Taila Santos fight, and I look at Valentina Shevchenko fight, they're just in completely different universes skill-wise. And I know just by the laws of averages, Valentina Shevchenko is eventually going to meet her match and lose. Whether she underestimates her opponent, whether she doesn't take her training camp seriously, whether her skills just naturally decline and somebody catches and closes that skill gap. But I just don't think this is going to happen in this fight. And I know this is for the women's flyweight title, which makes it important, but I just really have a hard time imagining Taila Santos being able to get the job done against Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, when's the last time Valentina Shevchenko has lost? Amanda Nunes by split decision back in 2017. And a lot of people, myself included, thought Valentina Shevchenko won that fight. And her last loss before that was Amanda Nunes as well. And that was a very close fight as well, which could have went Shevchenko's way. I mean, you look at the win, she's beat Lauren Murphy, she's beat Jessica Andrade, she beat Jennifer Maia, Caitlin Jukagian, Liz Carmouche, Jessica Ai, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, at least at that time, I would rate her much higher than Taila Santos. And I know Jędrzejczyk is technically a strawweight and she came up to flyweight. But I just don't see Taila Santos getting the job done unless there's been a massive regression in Valentina Shevchenko's skill set, or she has not taken Santos very seriously for this fight. So I'm kind of happy to see Shevchenko fight, but at the same time, this isn't a fight that gets me particularly hyped, even though it is a title fight. Moving down the card, we have Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk 2. This is a fight that I am so excited for. It's in the women's strawweight division, which I believe is the best women's division in all the UFC. You have a rematch from 2020 at UFC 248. This was my favorite fight of 2020. If you have not seen Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk 1, you need to go back and rewatch that fight. It was an incredible fight. You had Joanna Jędrzejczyk with that massive hematoma on her head. It was a back and forth fight. It genuinely could have went either way. It was a split decision. Weili Zhang gets it done. And then since that fight, Weili Zhang loses her belt. She gets head kick KO'd by Rose Namajunas, gets the rematch, loses a close split decision against Rose Namajunas, and now she's fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk again. And in the meantime, Joanna Jędrzejczyk has not fought anyone else. Her last fight was at UFC 248 in 2020 against Weili Zhang. So she's fighting Weili Zhang 2 times in a row. I don't like the inactivity from Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but I'm still very compelled with this matchup because the division is now wide open. You have Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who's lost twice to Rose, one by stoppage, one by decision. You have Weili Zhang, who lost twice to Rose, one by knockout, one by decision. And now you have a champion that's no longer Rose Namajunas. Carla Esparza was able to take that belt from Rose Namajunas. I say that, kind of sarcastically because that fight was god-awful. I can't believe I even watched that. And, the division is wide open. I truly believe when you start looking at the strawweight division, who can beat Carla Esparza? The question is easier to list who can't beat Taila Santos because I favor both Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang over her. I favor Marina Rodriguez over her in a rematch. I pretty much favor all the top strawweights against Taila Santos. And I believe that the UFC, there's no way they're going to book Rose Namajunas versus Taila Santos 3. That's not happening. So I believe the winner of Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk 2 will fight Taila Santos for the belt next, unless for some reason they decide to give Marina Rodriguez the next shot at Taila Santos. So this is a very important fight. Both are elite level fighters. They have the story of the original fight, which was an amazing fight, one of the best fights ever in the UFC. Definitely one of the best fights of 2020. If you haven't seen it, you have to go back and watch that fight. And I'm really looking forward to this fight. I'm most looking forward to the main event, Teixeira versus Procházka. But the second fight on this card that I'm most looking forward to is without a doubt Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And it means a lot within the division. And I know people kind of, argue with me a little bit. They say, oh, this fight can be amazing. This is a great stylistic matchup when talking about certain fights. But for me, one of the most important factors for me to rate a fight highly on paper is it has to have bearing on the division, has to have significance within the division, and this fight unequivocally has significance within the division. Moving down the card, and this is where the main card starts to get a little bit dicey, you have Rogerio Bontorin versus Manuel Kopp. This is a fight that I'm intrigued in, but you have Rogerio Bontorin, who's lost 3 out of his last 4. His only win in the last few fights is against Matt Schnell, which I don't think is that impressive. Manuel Kopp is a very interesting up-and-coming contender within the flyweight division, but at the same time, he recently had a fight canceled, at the end of April for some type of USADA doping violation or something along those lines. And maybe I missed the news story, but I find it weird that he's already back in action. Maybe I missed something on that. I'm always happy to see Manuel Kopp, and I think it's a fun matchup against Rogerio Bontorin, who's a very fun fighter. He wants to take you down, grapple you, look for a submission. But at the same time, guys, I do not think this should be on a main card of a pay-per-view. And maybe I'm just picky, but, I just have very high standards. I think this should be maybe the headliner of the prelims, maybe not even that. And it's on the main card, it's just under the featured fight on the main card. It's just not the greatest fight. Moving down the card, we have Jack Della Maddalena versus Ramazan Emeev. This is a fight that is interesting. I'm curious to see how far Jack Della Maddalena can go within the UFC. But at the same time, he's 1 fight removed from the Dana White Contender Series. Should he be opening the pay-per-view main card? I have a hard time believing that. I think the UFC, I know they've stacked pay-per-view cards in the past, and maybe we've gotten a little bit spoiled, but I just don't believe a guy that, and then maybe this card gets rearranged and this isn't the exact bout order. The UFC changes it up until a couple days before the fight. But I just don't feel like Jack Della Maddalena should be opening up the main card 1 fight removed from the Dana White's Contender Series. Moving down the card a little bit, there's not a lot of real notable fights on the card that I'm super excited for. Brendan Allen versus Jacob Malkoun, that's a semi-interesting fight. But at the same time, I think these prelims are going to be awful. And when grading the card, you have to kind of look at the entire card. The entire main card are the most notable matchups. I'm mostly excited for the main event. And I know that's always the case for the most part. But I just feel like the UFC could have done a better job with this UFC pay-per-view. Sometimes, the UFC pay-per-views are stacked, like UFC 268, 269. Even 274 was pretty solid. But this card, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. I know we have 2 title fights. I know we have the very interesting featured fight on the main card between Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Weili Zhang. But looking through this card, it just leaves a lot to be desired. The only fight, when I'm looking through the card right now, the only other fight that I really want to mention on this card is Andre Filho versus Jake Matthews. I am very interested in seeing Andre Filho back in action. This guy is super active, and he's always just winning fights impressively. He has that beautiful left hook KO over Cameron Van Camp. Before that, he fought Miguel Baeza, had a great knockout there as well. And then before that is when he took a short notice fight against Michel Pereira, and he almost won that fight. He ended up losing by decision, but he was looking very good early on in that fight. And as we see, Michel Pereira just beat Santiago Ponzinibbio. So I really believe at a young age, Andre Filho can probably make moves within the welterweight division. So I'm really looking forward to that fight. I think that fight should headline probably the prelims of UFC 275. But outside of that, the card leaves a lot to be desired. I actually thought the card was better than it is. As far as a grade goes, I really loved the main event. I think the main event is very, very compelling. But at the same time, I have to give this card a low grade, and I'm a tough grader. So guys, let me know what you think of my grade in the comment section. I am going to give this fight card, UFC 275, I am going to give it a D+. I just feel like it doesn't have enough quality fights that really matter within the division. And I know every pay-per-view card can't be UFC 268. It can't be UFC 274. But I feel at the same time, I feel like this card is kind of selling itself short. We pay, $75, $80 for these ESPN Plus pay-per-views, and this is what we're getting for our money. Don't get me wrong. I'm still going to buy it. I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to do a bunch of prediction videos for it. But at the same time, I can't give this. I thought about doing a C-, but I feel like the really only super compelling fight on this card is the main event, as well as Weili Zhang versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Outside of that, I know there's some decent fights, but this is an average fight night card without those 2 fights that I just mentioned, even with Valentina Shevchenko versus Taila Santos. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.